Hi everybody, welcome to our first video lecture for COM 4800 in the spring 2021 semester. In this video, I want to cover three major topics. The first is my overall approach to the course and the overall ideas we're going to be using in this course. The second is Dr. Stacy Perryman-Clark's involvement with our course. And the third is some important points in Chapter 1. So you're going to find all of those things in this video. Starting with the first one, our approach to the course. The course is called Diversity and Inclusion. And we started off with a discussion board asking, what are your definitions of diversity and inclusion? And how are they similar and how are they different? And there's 13 of us in the course, so we were all on the same discussion board, enjoying the benefit of other people's ideas and seeing what the scope of those ideas was. And one of the things you might have noticed, there was a certain pattern that diversity was a set of ideas, it's kind of a concept, whereas inclusion was more of a set of behaviors. So the language that most of you were using to talk about diversity and inclusion fell out that way, that diversity was a set of ideas or definitions and inclusions was behaviors that people did to connect with others. And if you've ever taken diversity training, quote unquote, in a business, or if you've seen the Diversity Day episode of The Office, you know that most diversity trainings, they call them trainings, in the workplace are just giving people a bunch of information and then having them sign something or giving them a certificate of completion. And then they go back out into the world or they go back into the workplace with that new information and things are expected to be better. But are they really better? Do people know what they're supposed to do with that information? Do they do anything with that information? Does the behavioral piece of it ever happen? Oftentimes not. So the approach we're going to take in this course is looking at what diversity is and what inclusion is, but also how do we foster positive behaviors in ourselves and in others in order to more successfully integrate a group or a workplace. So we're going to be taking a couple different approaches to this. We're going to be looking at diversity and inclusion as topics, but we're also going to be looking at how you teach and train people successfully. So for that reason, I'm asking you to get the Motet, Beebe, and Roach book, Training and Development. There are many different editions out there. The edition I have handy here is this one, but there are a couple others with different covers. As long as it's by these authors, I don't have a preference for the edition. So you might be able to find it cheaper online with an older edition. There might even be PDFs out there. I don't want you to have just go to a great deal of expense to get a hold of that book, but it is going to provide a focal point for us in how we're going to approach our study of diversity and inclusion. Let's talk about part 2, Dr. Perryman-Clark's involvement with us. Dr. Stacy Perryman-Clark is in charge of the African American Studies major, and she has a couple of challenges in her department area that she would like us to try to help her solve. Now in COM 4800, normally I would have the students go out and get your own client, someone to work with, some professional to work with that has a problem that you can solve. In this class, I've gone ahead and gotten a client for us. Since there are a small number of people in the class this time, I might have said there's 13 of you, and we're not in a face-to-face environment. Many of us are trying to isolate at home because of COVID and not interact with a lot of other people. This way, the small number of us can all be focusing on the same issue as we do our project, and you're not having to go out and find somebody to work with. Dr. Perryman-Clark is very grateful for us wanting to help her and being willing to help her, and she is going to tell us about some challenges that she's facing in her department and ask us for input on those and see if we can come up with ways and ideas for her to do her job better. So I'm really looking forward to you getting to meet her, which will occur over WebEx, and I will describe how that's going to happen in the interview prep video, which is a separate video from this one. You want to watch that interview prep video and do the assignment described in that video by January 23rd to get ready for that meeting with Dr. Stacy Perryman Clark. But I'll explain more about that in that interview prep video. So that's the second part of this. Now, in the past, I've had students do small groups for the project. I think we can do some things as a class and some things individually for this one due to the number of us that there are. So things like gathering information we might be able to do as a class, and then writing about that information I think you'll be able to do as individuals. If you would like to work with a partner, let me know. If you and another person want to work together and are willing to take the same grade on your work, we can talk about that. But right now my plan is for everybody to work individually, other than certain activities that we'll do together as a class. Okay, and then the third thing I'm going to talk about in this video is to hit some important points in chapter 1 of the textbook and describe how those are going to connect to our study of diversity and inclusion. These are our learning objectives for today. After reading chapter 1 and studying it carefully and listening to this lecture, you should be able to do the following things. You should be able to describe the differences between teaching and training. You should be able to provide examples of 3 approaches to consulting. You should be able to identify 3 reasons why training programs can fail. And you should be able to describe the steps in designing and presenting training. Now, part of designing training is learning to develop objectives like these. And when we get to that point in the semester, you'll be learning how to write objectives like this, learning outcomes like this. But I want you to notice something about these right up front. They're specific and measurable. And what that means is I don't say that participants will understand something, or participants will know something, or participants will have learned to appreciate something. No, I'm saying you can list things, you can describe things, you can explain things. That's what makes them specific and measurable. So if you're looking for, this is a hint, if you're looking for a study guide for what will be on exams later, pay special attention to these objectives slides in the lectures, because these are the things that I'm looking for you to be able to do at the end of studying each chapter material. We've already alluded to the main difference between teaching and training. Teaching is the imparting of knowledge. Training involves actionable steps. It's something tangible that you can do with the knowledge that you've learned. So many businesses conduct what they call diversity training for their employees, but what they're really doing is teaching. They're giving you a lot of information about diversity and expecting that you having this information is going to help you to interact more successfully with your coworkers. But there's a disconnect there. You haven't learned a new behavior based on that knowledge. So training is what connects those together. You learn some information and you learn what to do with it. So in training, you're looking for a behavioral outcome. You're looking for the person to be able to list certain things or explain certain things or to demonstrate a behavior that will allow you as the trainer to say, okay, that person gets it. that person gets a pass on my training because they are able to meet that learning outcome objective, right? So in most diversity training programs that I've seen in companies, they're really teaching, not training. They're giving you a lot of information, but not helping you to apply that information. That's what we're going to do. So 3 important distinctions between teaching and training. The first one here, training is skills-based. There's something you need to be able to do when you come out of it, not just that you know, not just that you've learned some facts, but you know what you're supposed to do. You have a tangible action that you can go take based on what you've learned. That's what makes it training. Training is based in performance, the second bullet point here. There's a level of competence that you're expected to demonstrate, and that competence is measurable. So as I mentioned a moment ago with those objectives, the student can list 3 things or explain 3 things or can demonstrate something. Those are measurable performance outcomes that tell me whether you've met the level of competence that I wanted you to meet. And then thirdly, training is what we call a closed system. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's look first at what's an open system. Education or knowledge is an open system. And by that we mean it's ongoing for the rest of your life. You might have learned about the solar system in elementary school, but throughout your life, and even now, today, you turn on TV and you might see something on the National Geographic Channel about some aspect of the world or geology, and you're adding to that information that you have about the solar system and the planets and the galaxies and how everything works. That's an open system. Knowledge is an open system. It's constantly evolving, you're constantly adding to it, right? Whereas we say training is a closed system. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has specific goals and specific outcomes. So if I'm going to come into your company and conduct a training on how to enact diversity and inclusion in your company, I'm coming in with some objectives. We're going to do some activities and learn some things. And at the end, I'm going to have you perform certain tasks, and I'm going to decide whether or not you've met the objectives. That's a closed system. You had a learning outcome and you met it. You can now do this thing that I came in to train you how to do. That's closed. So that also helps us think about objectives. If you have words like the person will know or understand something, that's more of an open system. That's like lifelong learning. But if you have the person will be able to do something after taking this training, that's a closed system. There's a series of events that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. One example I use to describe a closed system is, imagine I'm coming in to train you on how to build a birdhouse, okay? And I have a plastic bag for each of you with all the parts in it and all the tools you'll need. And I have you all sit at your little workstations, and I'm going to take you step by step through how to build a birdhouse. And that's my objective. That's what the training is all about. And at the end of the training, if you have successfully built a birdhouse, even though it might look a little wonky, everybody's might be a little different, but if you've successfully built a birdhouse, then my training outcome and objective has been met. But that's a closed system. I came in with materials to teach you how to build a birdhouse. You built it. You met my goals. Okay. Now, if I wanted you to learn about birds and how beautiful they are and how many different ones there are and how the different species of birds look different. That's an open system. That's ongoing, very broad learning, whereas a closed system is very specific. So let's go back to this slide that we saw earlier in the lecture and decide if we can meet the first objective, which was for you, the participant, to be able to describe differences between teaching and training. If I were to ask you to describe the differences between teaching and training, and you are able to do so accurately, then I can check that box and say that my training was successful and you met that learning objective, that specific and measurable learning objective. When a business decides that they want to have training conducted for their employees, there are some different ways they can go about it. Of course, they can design their own training in-house, or they can hire an outside trainer. And I'm going to describe 3 different approaches to consulting using outside trainers that many businesses will use. And some of these might lead to some ideas for you for a career path if you find this intriguing. The first thing that a business could do is purchase a training program. There's a business called SkillPath. You can look them up online, and there are many similar businesses that offer kind of prepackaged training in different areas. So if you go on their website, you would find a list of training programs in, say, office efficiency or hiring in interviews or customer service rep training or something like that. And you could either buy one of these training programs and do it yourself, or you could purchase both the training program and the consultant. So someone would come out and conduct this training for you at your business. And these are very popular. They tend to be kind of expensive, but they spare the business the bother and expense of developing the training on their own. However, these kind of trainings are kind of one size fits all. They're not customized to that particular business. So all of the activities and knowledge gained might not be exactly relevant to the business, but that is one approach that you could take. These other 2 approaches are a little more customized. Okay, the second one, the doctor-patient approach, is where you hire a consultant who comes in and you say, something's wrong and we need you to diagnose the problem and suggest a solution. So maybe you're having a high level of employee absenteeism or a high level of turnover, and you don't know what's causing that. And you bring in an outside consultant who's going to interview people and look through your accounting records and things like that and try to pinpoint where they think things are going wrong and suggest a remedy for you. So the doctor-patient approach, you go to the doctor, you tell them where it hurts, and they ask you questions and examine you and try to diagnose the problem, right? So the same with this diagnostic approach to consulting. The consultant comes, you have some idea what is wrong or what area the problem is in, but you don't have the problem nailed down. You don't know what it is specifically. That person is going to conduct an examination, determine what exactly the problem is, and suggest some remedies for it. And then the third approach to consulting, which this one is also customized, is a process approach. And for this one, you can think about what an efficiency expert would do. So if you have a business that follows a process, say we make keychains. We have a keychain factory, and our goal is to increase production of keychains. And we want a consultant to come out and evaluate our process and look at each step of our process and figure out how we could do it better. maybe there isn't a problem right now. We just want to improve. So we bring someone in to examine our process. That would be an efficiency expert or a process approach to consulting. Now, when I was in my MBA program, a classmate and I did a project with a local dental office because her husband was a dentist. And what we were looking at was from the time a patient walked in the door, registered, sat down in the waiting room, and then they were approached by a hygienist and taken back into an examining room. And then how long did they wait in the examining room before their procedures began? How long was the entire process before they ultimately checked out and went home? And what we were looking for was, are there bottlenecks in this process? Are there ways to speed things up? Are there steps that they're doing that could be skipped or combined in order to make it all happen faster? We were there as process consultants in that case. So think about these three approaches and how maybe they've been used in businesses where you have worked. Purchasing, training, using a doctor-patient approach, or bringing in a process expert. Let's look at some ways that training can fail, or people who undergo a training session might not be able to use that information in a practical way in the workplace. Now, we call that application learning transfer. So the person goes through this training session or completes this training module, but are they able to use that information in a new behavior in the workplace? That would be learning transfer. And here are some things that can go wrong or that can keep that from happening. The first is a non-supportive organizational culture. We're going to talk a lot about how the person at the top has to really be involved in and behind this training, has to support it, has to speak well of it, has to encourage employees to take this training and to use it. If the boss isn't supportive of this training, if the boss acts like it's just some dumb thing that we all have to go through, learning transfer is unlikely to take place because the employees are not going to see it as something that's meaningful to them. So if the people in authority are not supportive of the training, learning transfer can suffer. The second, if it's perceived as impractical or irrelevant. Sometimes we go through training programs that don't seem to have a lot to do with our job or aren't directly connected to our job. And this is a special problem that can come up with those purchased programs because they're not customized for that business. So there might be information in that training module that doesn't seem relevant to you. So you might tend to zone out and not absorb the information in the way that you could. The third item here, discomfort with change. None of us like change. The idea that we have to do something differently than we've been doing it before can be something we resist. The fourth one, separation from the inspiration or support of the trainer. Sometimes a trainer or a teacher is very charismatic and they're dynamic and we get really riled up about something when they're in the room with us and they're talking about how wonderful and important something is, and we get caught up in their electricity and enthusiasm. But then after they leave, the excitement can wane a little bit, and especially if we don't have their continued support as we try to employ those new skills in the future. So if our enthusiasm for the training is largely connected to liking and wanting to please the trainer, then that can wane over time. And the last one here, pressure from peers to resist. Peer pressure is real, even for us grown folks. We think of it as something that happens on the school playground, but it happens in workplaces too. And if you've ever had to take training or training modules at work, you know, people are going to complain about it and say, this isn't this is a waste of time, this isn't going to be any fun, maybe we can skip out early, this kind of thing. And you might not engage as much as you would like to because of the way that those around you are acting. So that can be another obstacle to learning transfer. Our textbook authors offer this 9-step plan for devising a training program. So if you were going to devise a training program from the ground up, these are the steps that you would need to go through. Now, we're not doing a full training program in this course. We are going to be working with Dr. Stacy Perryman Clark as diagnostic consultants, or kind of that doctor-patient consulting to help her with a problem. So we're going to be concentrating on the first 3 of these steps. We're going to be talking to her about what her needs are, analyzing what kind of tasks need to be done, and develop some objectives or some specific and measurable outcomes that we want to arrive at in order to help solve her problem. If you were actually going to be delivering a training session to a room full of people, you would continue on doing all of these things on the list, organizing your content, determining the methods of presentation or teaching or training you're going to use. And we will touch a little bit on learning styles to help us see what kind of methods are available for that. You would devise a training plan, conduct the training, and then assess the outcome. So again, if you were doing a full training program from start to finish, you would proceed through all of these steps. We will be doing some, but not all of them this semester. So here are your next steps. You'll want to read through Chapter 2 in the text and watch the Chapter 2 video lecture. Watch the interview prep video and prepare your interview prep assignment. Upload it to the Dropbox by the 23rd. In that assignment, we're going to be preparing to interview our client, Dr. Stacy Perryman Clark, in preparation for doing our term project. Dr. Clark has graciously agreed to meet with us on Friday the 29th at 2 p.m. over WebEx. Now, this is an asynchronous class, which means that we didn't have any specific class meetings announced beforehand, so I'm going to offer 10 points of extra credit for attending that interview event. However, you'll want to be there. We will be asking her the questions that we created in our interview prep assignment and gathering more information from her that will help us to complete our term project. So I ask you to be there if at all possible. All right, and I will see you in the next video.